esteemed guest of the Hamzaban Cultural Foundation, whose lectures are all in Persian and who's about to have its 70th meeting, is Mr. Fariborz Sahba. Fariborz Sahba is not only a prominent architect on an international level, and not only a national treasure to Iranians for his contributions, but he's also a member of the Baha'i community, and I will touch on some of the contributions that he has made in all of the three arenas, since we have many Baha'is here amongst us, as well as many people who have a background in architecture and an interest in Iranian culture and arts. Mr. Sahba was born in 1948, and he looks much younger than the stated age, so for what it's worth. But the reason I want to mention this is because when you tell a story, it's important to put it in the historical context of who Mr. Sahba is. Mr. Sahba was inspired by his mother to enter the field of architecture and pursued that at the University of Tehran. His professors at the time included very prominent instructors and professors who had come from such esteemed institutions as Harvard, who were guest lecturers at the time. At a very young age, his acumen and his creativity was known in the architectural community in Iran. He was given the kind of work that's usually given to people who are well into their careers, perhaps 2 or 3 decades into their careers, very early on. So in his very early 20s, he managed to design such architectural structures as the new town of Mahshahr, the Pahlavi Cultural Center in Sanandaj, Iran, and the School of Art in Sanandaj, Iran. And at that time, he was only in his 20s. Then came an international call from the international governing body of the Baha'is of the world, known as the Universal House of Justice, to any and all architects who wish to design the Baha'i house of worship, the mother temple for Asia. This house of worship was to be erected in a place called Bahapur near New Delhi, India. And among the many people who submitted architectural plans was Mr. Sahba. Mr. Sahba presented the plans, and this process of selection of who was to win, whose design was to win, took a couple of years. At the time that he designed this structure, this magnificent structure, he was in his 20s. The design was approved by the international governing body of the Baha'is of the world, known as the Universal House of Justice, and he was called on to come and put this program and actualize this design. There were many naysayers along the way, people who looked at the angles and the curvatures and the calculations that were needed, realized that the architecture for this took 10 years, that the process took 10 years. And it started in the 70s, and this temple was dedicated in 1986. During that time, many people said, it's a beautiful design, it can never come to fruition. So despite what all the naysayers said, based on the technological availabilities of the time, the challenges of the time working in an underdeveloped nation, Mr. Sahba had faith and had the creativity to bring this plan to life. The Mother Temple of the West for the Baha'is is also very significant in the architectural world. It's known as one of the most magnificent feats in architecture in the 20th century. It is currently one of the most visited buildings in the world. Subsequent to that project that ended in 1986, Mr. Sahba was called upon by the Universal House of Justice, the buildings around what's known as the Ark to the Baha'is. This includes the terraces that lead to and go beyond the shrine of the Bab, and all the buildings that surround it, including the Center for the Study of the Text, including for working the Center for Archives into the building and various other shrines that sit on Mount Carmel in northern Israel in the city of Haifa. That project took about 15 years, and he completed that project subsequent to that. Mr. Sahba is the recipient of many international awards. There are too numerous to count, but if I were to mention a couple, he received in 1987, the Institution of Structural Engineers of the United Kingdom granted a special award to him for the Baha'i Temple in India. It cited a building so emulating the beauty of a flower and so striking in its visual impact. Subsequently, he received the Paul Waterbury Outdoor Lighting Design Award from the Illuminating Engineering Society of North America in 1988. In 1990, the Fariborz House of Worship in India was recognized by the American Concrete Institute as one of the finest concrete structures of the world. The Globart Award in 2000 was given to him by the Globart Academy in Vienna, Austria, for overcoming religious barriers and promoting the unity and harmony of people of all nations and social strata to an extent unsurpassed by any other architectural monument worldwide. Having said this, this is the international acclaim of Mr. Sahba. Within the Iranian space, I already mentioned some of the noteworthy structures that he has contributed to and designed in Sanandaj. Additionally, within the Baha'i community, there's some notable history that some of you may not know that I think is good to mention. Mr. Sahba is the grandson of Sayyid Mehdi Golpaygani. Sayyid Mehdi Golpaygani was the nephew of Mirza Abul Fazl Golpaygani, who was himself a religious cleric who later unrobed himself from the Islamic Shia background and joined the Baha'i community of Iran, despite a lot of controversy at that time. Mr. Sahba's grandfather was also a Shia cleric who took his turban off and burned it before he joined the Baha'i community as an act of defiance against the religious establishment of that time. He lived in Ashgabat at that time, and he was instrumental in developing the Baha'i community of Ashgabat at the time. Subsequently, when Ashgabat is in modern-day Turkmenistan, but at the time it was under Soviet control, once the Soviets took over, all religions were suppressed, including the Baha'i community, and over 2,000 Baha'is in Ashgabat, Turkmenistan perished at that time, including his grandfather, who was subjected to significant amount of torture and difficulty, and some of the rest of his family who were sent to Siberia in the gulags to have a very difficult prison term. Later, when the memoirs from prison emerged, Mr. Sahba collected those in a book known as Years of Silence. And in this book, he chronicles the difficulties of a forgotten people of the Baha'i community of Ashgabat. Additionally, at the age of 20, Mr. Sahba founded the Varga literary magazine. And a lot of you may remember that who lived in Iran, because this magazine was a way to communicate with Baha'i children about various virtues and matters of importance. It had contributors who were junior youth. It had illustrators, his first wife who passed away of cancer. And he himself was the editor-in-chief of that magazine. The magazine was in full force for 25 years until the Islamic Revolution of 1979 shut its operations down. On a very personal note, at a time when my family went through very significant turmoil with the illness of my mother, Dr. Tahir Berjis, having experienced personal loss of his own wife, was a friend and confidant to my father. And so we're very grateful to him on a personal level, on a level from the perspective of the Iranian community, and from the international community and his contributions to architecture and elevating of understanding of what's possible. He's truly a visionary, and we're very glad to have him amongst us today. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Fariborz Sahba to the stage.
Thank you so much for coming here, and it's my pleasure that I have this opportunity to once more be at the presence of the friends in Arizona. I'm so grateful to dear Nizam. He was too generous, and I should make a small correction, because I don't want anybody to think that work that I have not done was claimed under my name. I built the terraces of the Shrine of the Bab, and I was builder and project manager of the buildings of the Ark, but I was not architect of the buildings of the Ark. That was designed by my dear friend and brother that we have years together, worked together, and Mr. Amonat. I built the buildings during that period. I was project manager of the whole complex in that building, but not the architect of the Ark buildings. I was the builder of them. And also, Pahlavi Cultural Center was the largest cultural center of Iran, inside Marble Palace in Tehran, not in Sanandaj. The Sanandaj Cultural Center was different. So it was just a mistake. I just corrected. It should not be considered as something that I pick on my lovely brother Nizam Jan. It's only misunderstanding from the internet. Anyhow, friends, my talk today is about really my relation with the Shrine of the Bab, because we are in the period of the year of 200th anniversary of the Bab. It's so important that we remember some of those things, and that's why I dedicate my talk to the Bab. During the years that I was in Haifa for 15 years, I had several opportunities and occasions to talk to non-Baha'is. And Jews of Israel in particular were very keen to know what Baha'is are doing. One of those events was an event that the Rotary Club of Israel had organized in one of the most famous hotels of Haifa, and it was organized for the Rotarians of all the cities of Haifa. They had come there, and it was routine. I went together with Mr. Albert Lincoln, the Secretary General of the Baha'i World Community. So I did a presentation, and I showed some of the slides and all of that, and I briefly mentioned about what we are doing, ideas that we have, and the importance, significance of this holy place. When I finish my talk, normally it's tradition in Rotary Club that one of the Rotarians is called to thank the speaker. So a very, very famous, wealthy Israeli Arab, Mr. Khayyat, that is owner of, for your information, the richest people of Israel are Arabs, and they are. This Mr. Khayyat owns half of Mount Carmel. It's very, very rich man, very famous, and very highly educated people. He was the one who came to tribune to say thank you. When he came to the loudspeaker, and he just started with Ya Baha'u'llah, Ya Aliyul Ala. I said, oh my God. I looked at Mr. Lincoln and I said, hey, you are going to be fired by the House of Justice. What you did? I mean, I didn't say anything. He said, you know, friends, Mr. Sahba is a Baha'i. And because he is a Baha'i, he's not allowed to speak to us and tell us about the Baha'i faith. But I am not a Baha'i. And I want to talk to you today about the Baha'is. And we were really, together with Mr. Lincoln, we were just looking at our shoes because he didn't want to say anything. And he said, 170 years ago, 160 years ago at that time, he said, in Iran, a very famous, powerful king who called himself the King of the Kings decided to destroy the cause of God and message of a person that was known as Bab. So they put him in prison and they put him in a fortress at the top of a mountain, and they isolated him and they persecuted his disciples and they could not deal with him. So they decided to kill him and get rid of him. So they put him in front of the 750 regiment of soldiers, and they shot 750 bullets. And from all the people of this world, only one of his disciples stood in front of him, and he said, I want to receive the bullet that goes reach to his body. First should come to me. He protected him. And they were part pieces, and their blood and their bone and their skin became one. And this king decided, instructed that they throw his body in a ditch so that the wild animals and dogs, they will eat him. And it's all gone. But then he said that his disciples, they stole the body and they hide it, and for 60 years they did that. And then Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, that was sent by that king and another king, two Muslim kings, the greatest power of Islam, millions and millions of people of Islam, the king of them, king of Iran and king of Ottoman Empire, together they decided to put him forth in Akka, and they sent him there. On the way that he was going to Akka, he stood on Mount Carmel, and he showed with his finger this place, this mountain, and he said that his disciples should bring the body of the Bab and make a monument of love in this place, love and faith in this mountain. Then he said, we are so honored. This is our honor, this is our sharaf, he said in Arabic. He said, this is our pride that this shrine is here. And this has become blessing to our country. This is what he said. So, and went on and on anyhow. But really I want to say that that day I realized from what he said, I realized that the shrine of the Bab on this Mount Carmel is really very embodiment of the history of the faith. That they, you see, the first day that the Bab declared his mission, he revealed Tafsir Surah Yusuf, the chapter of the Joseph. He revealed the meaning of that. And in that book that he revealed on the first day of his mission, he described himself and Baha'u'llah as Joseph, that was the symbol of beauty, purity, and he was under injustice and absolute unfair hatred of his brothers. He was thrown in a well, and eventually they did everything that they could so that his name is forgotten. He came out of that well, and he became the Aziz Misr, the loved of Egypt, and he became, and whatever they did with him, he did not, he was not forgotten. And then Bab himself says that Joseph is me. Joseph is Baha'u'llah, the one that will come, the promised one that will come. He said that because he said all of the manifestation of God or Joseph, they come at the most brilliant beauty. They be forced into a well of forgetfulness, and they want to destroy them, but they come out. So this is exactly what is the shrine of the Bab when we see today. They did everything they could do. They did everything that they could do, and he came out on the other side of the world in such majesty and glory and beauty that this man that is millionaire, such a powerful man, such a for him, as of course, whatever we see in this, what God, in the eyes of the people of this world, that is the greatest, the most beautiful things that is happening. We are doing this about everything that Baha'is have done. In my own life, when I look at that, I say that I look at the Temple of India. We have, the Temple of India cost $10 million. I don't know how many 7-Elevens here are more expensive than $10 million. $10 million is a joke, is nothing. There are buildings in India, temples in India. One of them is Akshadram, $400 million. They don't have at all that love and appearance of what is built in the name of Baha'u'llah. When I was in England, the revolution of Iran happened, and when I was in Iran, I was member of the Baha'i Publishing Trust. One of the cousins of dear Zia was manager of that publishing trust, and I was member of the board. And it had big names, but in reality, it was the basement of the Baha'i Hazirat al-Quds that has been destroyed partly. The dome was destroyed by Falsafi and all of that. Under the basement, there were 5, 6, 10 photo stencil machines, and with these machines, we were printing the writings of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Eventually, with lots of revolutionary acts, we bought few Xerox machines that was, all of them were much worse than what you have in your office today. And some of the writings of the Baha'u'llah and all of the holy writings was published there. When I was in London after the revolution, I heard in the news that said the largest publishing trust of the Middle East was discovered under the basement of the Baha'i Hazirat al-Quds. At the beginning, I said, what a lie. What a rubbish. I mean, how you could say those 5 photocopy machines as the biggest? But then I thought, yes, that is true. Because when they opened the door of that basement, what they saw was the greatest publishing trust of the world. Because of course, those machines that they published the writings of Baha'u'llah for the first time in the world, they were great. They were magnificent. Anything that the Baha'is are doing today, they put it looks so majestic and great. Shrine of the Bab is not even more than few $100,000. $100,000. And it has such a beauty and majesty. It's really like a queen of Carmen. It's so beautiful because of that greatness, that thing that has come. And now, at the same time, it's so important that we realize that the history of the Bab is so important for us to know. What happened, the life of the Bab, it's so great for us to know. It's because it's all heroic age of the Baha'i faith. You know, the dawnbreakers that we all know history of them. First of all, no other religion has a proper written history. Every book that we know about the Islam, about the Christianity, about the Judaism was written many, many, many years after those prophets have left this world. Many years. I didn't know, just recently I learned that all the Bibles that we have in this world, all of them, none of the writers met the Jesus. None of them. It was collected later. Muhammad, we know that the newest, the oldest history that we have from Islam is about more than 100 years after passing of Muhammad was there. This is the only history that was written at the time of the Prophet of the faith, of Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah himself instructed to Nabil to write it. He said, you write the history. And he told him every week you should come with one chapter and read it for me. It's so interesting. And he listened to that and he edited, he corrected for him. He said, we have to, what? And the copy that exists in Holy Land right now is the version that Nabil had corrected or crossed it with his hand and has written. In fact, but then also he rewrote everything in a clean copy, and Baha'u'llah took it from him and put it in a small box next to his bed. But that was at the night of the passing of Baha'u'llah, that box was stolen. So we don't have the edited copy, we don't have the, then beloved guardian took the copy, the draft copy, and read it and wrote the part of the Bab, that he said this is the historic period of the Bab that is Baha'is should know and be proud of it. And then rest of that, he wrote it up to the period of the end of the period of the Bab. And that's very interesting. He revealed, beloved guardian wrote this to the Baha'is of the United States, right that. He said, feel impelled, appeal entire body American believers. He's telling that I want to tell all of the American believers that to henceforth regard Nabil's soul-stirring narrative as essential adjunct as to reconstructive teaching program. For all of the teaching programs, you have to use Nabil. Then he says, as unchallengeable textbook in their summer schools, as source of inspiration in all literary and artistic pursuits, as an invaluable companion in times of leisure. That's the most important thing that says is good for us to read it. And he says that, and as unfailing instrument to allay distress and resist attacks of critical, disillusioned humanity. That is good for us to read it when we are attacked by the... Now, this is a beauty of this history that we want, and this is all, in my opinion, it is crystallized in the shrine of the Bab when we look at that. Now, beloved guardian tells us that the shrine of the Bab is the most important holy place that we have, because it is the only holy place that has been blessed by the footsteps of Baha'u'llah, as well as by very body of the Bab. In one place, he says, no other holy place has that status. This is exactly the word that he used. He said, no other holy place has that status. So it's really interesting to know we have a place where Baha'u'llah stood there, decided it should be here, and then he was there, Abdul Baha was there, and beloved Bab himself, the body of the Bab, is there. So it's so important. It is so important that later on, beloved guardian called it center of universe. Center of universe. He said 9 concentric circles that emanate from the shrine of the Bab, and the 9th one is the universe. That's the center of universe, he himself called it. And it is really the center of the hope for the people of the world when we look at that.